The day everything changed. A 12-year-old human girl was attacked by an alien beast. No one expected her to survive. My name is Abigail Reynolds, and I'm 17 now. But this story takes me back to when I was just 12 years old, living on Mars Colony Elysium with my mother Diana. It was the day that changed everything, the day I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you can put you in the greatest danger. 6 months before that terrible morning, our lives had been normal. Well, as normal as life could be on a distant Martian colony. My father Marcus worked as a security specialist on Luna, visiting us only during quarterly transport windows. Mom and I had our routines. She'd walk me to school through the safe main transit tubes, help with homework, and we'd spend evenings in the botanical gardens. Then the new escape arrived. It was a fully immersive virtual reality network that had finally reached our distant colony. Overnight, that glowing neural interface became more important to my mother than anything else in our habitat unit. More important than meals, bedtime stories, or her 12-year-old daughter. I watched her change day by day. The woman who used to read me stories about Earth's ancient forests now spent every waking moment with specialized lenses covering her eyes, her fingers dancing frantically across holographic interfaces. She was responding to messages from people she'd never physically met, liking photos of lives that seemed infinitely more exciting than our existence on the colony. "Mom, can you help me with my exobiology homework?" I would ask. "In a little while, sweetie," she would respond without looking away from the pulsing interface. But a little while never arrived. During the first weeks, I persisted. I pulled at her sleeve, stood between her and the interface, asked silly questions just to capture a few seconds of attention. But gradually, I learned it was easier to simply not bother her. At 12 years old, I began growing up alone. The morning everything changed started like any other. I woke early, laid out my education uniform, prepared my nutrition pack, and organized my data tablets in my backpack, all by myself, as I'd learned to do. "Mom, I'm ready for school," I announced, my small voice nearly lost in the sterile silence of our habitat. Diana was on the couch as always, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her neural interface, eyes glazed behind those specialized lenses that connected her to the neuroscape. "Mom," I insisted, taking a few steps closer. "School. It's time." What happened next would set in motion a chain of events that would bring me face to face with death itself, and teach me that sometimes the monsters we fear aren't the ones hiding in the shadows, they're the ones we create when we stop paying attention to what matters most. Alone in the corridors. "Already?" my mother said without looking at me. "You'd better go then." My heart tightened. My teacher had emphasized that we couldn't be late that day because we had our Xenobiology presentations. I had rehearsed for weeks, memorizing every detail about the newly discovered microbial life forms from Europa's subsurface ocean. "But Mom, you always said it's dangerous to go through the maintenance corridors alone," I tried one last time, my voice quivering slightly. She finally looked at me, a brief flash of guilt crossing her face before being replaced by impatience. Behind her, I could see the interface reflecting against the habitat window, messages from someone named Richard, filled with heart emojis and suggestive comments. "The colony is perfectly safe, Abby. Nothing dangerous can get inside our dome. Just follow the main maintenance route. You won't get lost." I wanted to cry, wanted to scream, wanted to throw my backpack on the floor and refuse to leave. But something in her expression told me it would be pointless. That neural interface had created a barrier between us that I didn't know how to breach. "Fine," I finally conceded, adjusting my backpack on my shoulders. "I'll go alone." Something in my tone must have touched some remnant of maternal instinct because she hesitated for a second. "Are you sure? If you want, I could." But before she could complete the sentence, a notification pulsed on her interface. Another message from Richard. "No, it's okay," I said quickly. "I can manage." "That's my girl," she responded, already distracted again by the interface. "You're brave and smart." Empty words uttered by a mother who wasn't really seeing me. I left our habitat with a knot in my stomach that wasn't just nervousness. It was the fear of a child who, for the first time in her life, felt truly alone in a universe too vast to comprehend. The first 15 minutes of my walk were uneventful. The artificial lighting of the maintenance corridor cast long shadows as I followed the route painted in blue along the floor, the designated path to the education sector. The familiar hum of life support systems provided a mechanical lullaby that brought some comfort. But as I advanced, the surroundings began to change. The well-maintained residential sector corridors gave way to more industrial pathways, until I reached the section I always dreaded, the crossing through the research annex. The corridor narrowed, with pipes and conduits running along the walls and ceiling like mechanical veins. The air became cooler, tinged with the sterile scent of antiseptic and something else, a strange organic smell I couldn't identify. The overhead lights flickered intermittently, creating a dance of shadows on the metal floor. "Don't be afraid," I whispered to myself, repeating the words my father always said during our video calls. "Fear is just your mind imagining things that haven't happened." How I wished Dad was there with me. I was halfway through the darkest section of the research annex when I heard the first metallic clang. I froze in the middle of the corridor, my eyes scanning the dimly lit surroundings. "Must be just the cooling systems," I said aloud, trying to convince myself. I resumed walking, but something primal in my brain was screaming that something was wrong. It was the same sensation I experienced when I woke up in the middle of the night, certain there was someone in my room even though I knew I was alone. That's when I heard it, a low sound like a raspy hiss emanating from the shadows ahead. My blood turned to ice. Face to face with death. This time I didn't try to rationalize it. That ancient part of the human brain that still carries the memory of danger from Earth's prehistoric savannas triggered every alarm. Slowly, with almost imperceptible movements, I turned my head toward the sound. That's when I saw them, eyes gleaming at me about 20 meters away, partially concealed behind a tangle of exposed conduits. A pair of amber eyes observed me with predatory intensity. I blinked, hoping it was my imagination, but when I looked again, they were still there. As my eyes adjusted to the low light, the outline of the creature became clear, sleek, spotted golden fur covered a muscular body, a long tail swaying slowly behind it, and those eyes, intelligent, hungry, assessing. It wasn't from Earth. It wasn't from Mars. It wasn't from anywhere humans had catalogued. The air escaped from my lungs in a silent gasp of pure terror. My 12-year-old brain struggled to process the sight of an alien predator, something that shouldn't exist inside our supposedly secure colony, studying me as if I were its next meal. I knew from our Xenobiology classes that I shouldn't run. Running would trigger a chase response in predatory species across the universe, a convergent evolutionary trait. I should appear larger, make noise, back away slowly. But all that theoretical knowledge vanished in the face of visceral fear. My muscles locked, my entire body paralyzed like a statue in the middle of the corridor. It felt as if my feet had been welded to the metal floor. The creature moved, emerging partially from its hiding place. It was smaller than I had imagined, probably a juvenile of its species, but still infinitely more powerful than anything I had ever faced. Its movements were fluid, silent, hypnotic in their deadly grace. With each step it took in my direction, my terror intensified. I felt my vision darkening at the edges, oxygen suddenly seeming too scarce in the corridor. The creature stopped about 10 meters from me, lowering into a slight crouch. Even with my limited experience, I recognized the posture from the nature documentaries I watched with Dad during his visits. It was the position that preceded an attack. In that moment, facing imminent death, my body finally reacted, not with movement, but with sound. From my throat escaped a high-pitched, desperate scream laden with all the fear and abandonment I felt. Help! It was the loudest scream of my life. A scream that carried not just fear, but all the loneliness I had been experiencing. The scream echoed through the metal corridor, startling maintenance drones that scuttled away into recessed wall compartments. For a brief moment, the creature hesitated, its amber eyes blinking at the unexpected sound, But the hesitation lasted only a second. With muscles coiled like springs, the alien beast launched itself toward me. I saw the movement in slow motion, the powerful thrust of its hind legs, the golden body extending in midair, the claws extended and gleaming under the flickering lights. I closed my eyes, my small body instinctively curling inward, waiting to feel the pain of claws and teeth. Instead, I heard another sound, a human adult yell, followed by the metallic clang of something being repeatedly struck against the floor. "Hey! Get away from her! Back off! The guardian angel!" I opened my eyes to see a tall figure positioned between me and the creature, wielding what appeared to be a maintenance tool, a hydrospanner. It was Walter Kowalski, the 60-year-old maintenance technician who serviced the environmental systems near our habitat sector. "Abby, get behind me now." I obeyed instinctively, moving my trembling legs behind Walter's protective figure. He continued shouting and banging the hydrospanner against the metal floor, creating a deafening cacophony that confused the creature. The beast, completely surprised by the interference, had halted its attack and now retreated a few steps, hissing. Its amber eyes darted between me and my protector, calculating its chances. "Go away. Get out of here." Walter continued shouting, his voice carrying all the authority of someone who had spent his life working with the dangerous systems that kept us alive on this hostile planet. The creature hesitated for several more seconds. I could sense its frustration, its confusion at the unexpected resistance. Finally, with a last irritated hiss, it turned and disappeared into a ventilation shaft. My body collapsed. My legs gave way and I fell, sitting on the metal floor, shaking uncontrollably as tears flowed freely down my face. I was alive. Against all odds, I was alive. Walter, still vigilant and scanning the corridor, knelt beside me. His calloused hands, gentle despite the strength with which they had wielded the hydrospanner, touched my shoulder carefully. "It's okay now, kiddo. That thing's gone. You're safe." But I couldn't stop trembling. Convulsive sobs shook my small body and words simply wouldn't form. "Can you walk, Abby?" he asked gently. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like they were made of gel. I shook my head, unable to speak. "That's okay. No problem." With an agile movement for his age, Walter secured the hydrospanner to his utility belt and knelt down. "I'll carry you. Hold on tight." I wrapped my arms around the old technician's neck and he lifted me as if I weighed nothing. The familiar smell of machine oil and recycled air that emanated from him brought a comforting sense of security that I hadn't felt in months. Finally, I had an adult who was genuinely protecting me. As Walter walked quickly down the corridor, always vigilant, I finally found my voice. "What was that thing?" "They said nothing dangerous could get inside the colony." "And normally, no," Walter replied, his eyes constantly scanning the shadows. "But that was a Proxima Feline, what the scientists call them anyway. Something must have gone wrong in the Xenobiology lab. That's the third containment breach this month. The administration has been keeping it quiet to avoid panic." This information shocked me. If the adults knew there were dangerous alien creatures potentially loose in the maintenance corridors, why had my mother sent me alone? When we reached the end of the research annex section, Walter asked the question I'd been dreading: "What were you doing alone in these corridors, young lady? Where's your mother?" My face burned with shame. I lowered my eyes, unable to look at him. "Mom was busy. I decided to come to school by myself." It was a half-truth. In reality, my mother had abandoned me to stay plugged into the neuroscape. Walter didn't head toward the education pods. Instead, he turned toward the path that led to his maintenance office, where his wife Eleanor was waiting. "I think you need some time before going to class, kiddo. Plus, we need to report what happened to your parents and colony security." Coming home. The small office with its blue door was one of my favorite places. On weekends when Dad was working on Luna and Mom was busy with the neuroscape, I frequently escaped there, drawn by the smell of Eleanor's homemade cookies and the attention I received from the childless couple. Eleanor was organizing supply manifests when she saw us approaching. Upon noticing my expression and the state I was in, she immediately dropped her data tablet. My stars, what happened? The Proxima Feline almost got her in section 42, Walter replied simply. Near the Xenobiology annex. Eleanor's face paled. Heaven help us. Is she hurt? No, thank the stars. I got there in time. For the first time in months, I had adults who truly cared about me. Inside the cozy maintenance office, Eleanor wrapped me in a tight hug. The scent of synthetic lavender that always accompanied her brought a fresh wave of tears to my eyes, this time of relief and gratitude. While she prepared hot chocolate from their precious earth imports and served a generous piece of synthesized cornbread, I finally told the whole story. How my mother was absorbed in the neuroscape, how she suggested I go alone, how I was afraid but went anyway. The couple exchanged meaningful glances but made no comments about my mother's behavior. Instead, they focused on comforting me. Eleanor tried calling our habitat unit several times, but nobody answered. My mother rarely responded to the habitat comm system, preferring communication via her neural interface. I think I'll have to go personally and inform Diana, said Walter, adjusting his utility belt. And I'll notify colony security. The community needs to be warned. When Walter returned an hour later, his face was serious. Your mother is very shaken, kiddo. When I told her what happened, she started crying. I think she realized the gravity of the situation. Is she angry with me? I asked in a small voice. No, child, he replied gently. She's angry with herself. Late that afternoon, Dad arrived at the colony. Eleanor had managed to contact him at Quantum Dynamics on Luna, and he had pulled every string possible to secure an emergency transport back to Mars, a 50-hour journey he had made without stopping. When he saw me in the maintenance office, his eyes filled with tears. He scooped me up in an embrace so tight I could barely breathe. My brave explorer, he murmured against my hair. Dad's here now. All the emotion I had held back during the day finally erupted. I cried in my father's arms like I hadn't cried in months, all the tears of fear, loneliness, and abandonment I had bottled up. That night, for the first time in months, our family sat together for a serious conversation. Dad had discovered the whole truth about what had happened and was furious with Mom. But more important than the initial anger was what happened afterward. They talked, really talked, about how our family had disintegrated over the past months. Mom cried a lot. She apologized to me repeatedly, hugged me as she hadn't done in weeks. She promised things would change. The neural interface will have specific usage times, Dad said firmly. No neuroscape during meals or activities with Abby. For the first time in months, I felt hope that my family might become a real family again. Nearly dying had been necessary for my mother to remember I existed. The days that followed weren't easy. Mom had difficulty disconnecting from the neuroscape, sometimes glancing anxiously at the drawer where Dad had asked her to store the interface when not in use. But gradually, our routine began to change. She started cooking with me again, helping with my homework, talking about my day at school. Dad changed too. He began looking for work closer to home so he wouldn't be away from us for such long periods. We almost lost you, he told me one night. I'm never going to let that happen again. The entire colony mobilized. A shared transportation system was organized for children going to the education pods. No child in Elysium would ever make that journey alone again. My encounter with the Proxima Feline had protected other children too. A few weeks later, a xenobiologist from Earth came to our colony to study the situation with the escaped creature. We discovered it was a juvenile female, displaced from her containment habitat when a power fluctuation affected the security fields. I followed the entire process of recapturing and relocating the animal. Instead of feeling anger or fear, I felt a strange compassion for the creature. It was just trying to survive, just as I had been that morning in the corridor. When I grow up, I announced during dinner one evening, I want to work protecting species like the Proxima Feline. Dad smiled. You'll be an excellent xenobiologist if you decide to follow that path. Mom, who was serving dessert, a pudding made from Eleanor's recipe, added, we could look for some books about alien species in the colony database. It was the first time in months that she had suggested an activity together. 1 year after my encounter with the Proxima Feline, our family was transformed. Not just because I had almost lost my life, but because that event forced us to confront truths we had been avoiding for months. Mom learned that no virtual connection is worth more than the real life of her daughter. Dad understood that working far from home had too high a cost. And I learned that sometimes you need to scream very loudly to be heard. Today, at 17, I work as a volunteer in the Interplanetary Conservation Project. I study xenobiology and dream of specializing in the Proxima systems. The creature that almost killed me ended up defining my future. I still maintain close contact with Walter and Eleanor. They are my heart grandparents, the people who saved me when my own family was fragmented. When I tell this story now, many ask if I hold resentment toward my mother. The answer is no. She was a lonely woman who got lost in an era when the new escape was new, when nobody yet fully understood its dangers. What I learned is that sometimes we need a very big shock to wake up to what really matters. My mother needed to almost lose me to realize I existed. My father needed to imagine my death to understand that physical distance has limits. The Proxima Feline taught me that alien nature must be respected, not feared. Walter showed me that there are still guardian angels among us. And my family proved to me that love, even when wounded, can be rebuilt. To all the children who feel invisible, scream. Scream loudly. Scream whenever necessary. Sometimes a scream is all we need to be seen. To all parents lost in virtual worlds, look up. Your children are right there, needing you in the real world. Because some lessons we only learn when it's almost too late. And some scars, even the ones you can't see, make us stronger. In the middle of that corridor, I learned that courage isn't not being afraid, it's crying for help when we need it. And sometimes our guardians are 60 years old and carry a hydrospanner. The Proxima Feline taught me to respect alien nature, but it was my family that taught me that true love always finds a way to come home. Abigail Reynolds. Xenobiology student. Elysium Colony, Mars. Survivor of the encounter of March 23, 15. The end.